Next on Cold Case.
We get a spatter that's going straight this way, so that tells me this, what, he's sitting on the log here. Geez, that's almost execution style.
Yes. Well, it's some kind of puncture wound. What do you think, Rick? I mean, it's not even like a knife.
It's definitely not a gunshot wound.
A murder is committed in the United States every 24 minutes. Over 1/3 of these homicides go unsolved.
So there's definitely not an accidental. We've got a homicide here.
Detectives classify these murders as cold cases. Hello, I'm Richard Crenna, and this is Cold Case. Behind every unsolved homicide, there's a broken family, a frustrated police department, and often a detective who won't let go. Tonight we're going to introduce you to the detectives who are determined to solve their cold cases. And we'll follow them on their journey through an actual murder investigation. A parent's greatest fear is the abduction of their child. In Dallas, Texas, a series of kidnappings have led some investigators to believe that there is a killer targeting children. Detective Martha Sanders takes us on her investigation.
I responded to a call regarding a missing child over at the Dobie Elementary School with other detectives from my office. We were already concerned because the child had already been missing 3 hours.
Hi, honey.
Good.
What do we got?
Well, we were trying to go over the old areas that have been done.
When a parent realizes that their child is missing and they're not where they're supposed to be, it's very important that they call the police as soon as possible.
What have y'all covered so far?
Okay, we covered everything that
It's during those critical periods that the child, if has in fact been abducted, we can respond very quickly. A lot of people are under the false impression that you have to wait 24 hours on a missing person. That does only apply if they're adults. But with the child, there's no reason to wait.
We're more of a wooded area. This is Proctor.
Oh, okay. I'd like to meet her.
This is Detective Sanders. This is Proctor.
Mrs. Proctor, I'm Detective Sanders. Nice to meet you. I spoke with the mother, Laura Proctor. She advised me that the little girl's name was Christy Proctor and that she was 9 years old. We're going to try to get your daughter back home safely, okay?
I told Detective Sanders about Christy. She had never caused me a minute's problem. I mean, she was a very compliant child. She was very sweet. She was the perfect baby. I brought her home from the hospital. She slept all night, every night.
Pink blouse and...
She told me that she had gone that afternoon to play with a girlfriend of hers. Her name was Maria.
And
she never made it home.
She's about 14? She's right.
And I think deep down inside me, I knew that it was really bad because my sister wanted to call my parents. And I said, no, let's just let them have one more night of peace.
I do know that she had a little purple heart-shaped box with her.
Laura told me that Christy was carrying a plastic Purple Heart. She was very attached to the heart because it was given to her by someone that was very valuable to her, and that's her aunt.
Officer, I see lots of kids in this neighborhood.
When we established that there was a kidnapping, the Federal Bureau of Investigation was brought in, and they too brought in a whole bunch of agents. Usually, when a victim is taken, the chances of finding them alive after the first 24 hours is pretty slim. My gut feeling was that maybe she was probably already gone. But I wasn't sure, and I was praying and hoping that my feelings were wrong.
We found some evidence lying around right here at this intersection. and brought you over, figured you might want to gather it, take a look at it.
I was directed to an area where there were a bunch of broken fragments, and the color of them was purple.
Does that look like the color of the heart Christy was carrying?
My first thought was, she was taken by force, because she wouldn't have left it behind deliberately.
She's a real nice person. This is Detective Sanders, and she'll work with you?
I interviewed Christy's friend.
I'm Detective Sanders, and I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions.
They left her residence at 5:45 because Christy told her she needed to be home at 6, and Christy was a very punctual little girl. Maria told me she walked Christy halfway home, and that was right by the teacher's parking lot at Dobie Elementary School.
And that's when we split up. I told her goodbye.
She turned around and saw Christy continued walking. Parents are always looked at as suspects in the early stages of an investigation in a child abduction case, especially in situations where you have parents that are divorced.
Jim, nice to meet you. I'm Detective Sanders.
I spoke with Christy's father. They had been divorced already for 8 years. We did background checks on them. They were polygraphed. In this case, the parents were cleared of any involvement in the kidnapping. Going into Christy's room, you kind of get a sense of what she was about. The way she had her things.
What about these pictures on the wall? Oh, she did those with her little brother.
Laura told me a lot about her.
She likes dolls.
And I started feeling very much like I knew her, even though I didn't. Detective Sanders can I help you. I was contacted by a detective who advised me that another little girl had been abducted 3 days prior to Christy Proctor's disappearance.
Nice to meet you. You're Tiffany, right? You want to come on back with me?
This little girl was on her way to school. There was a white van. The van stopped. A white male in his mid-20s chased her down, forced her into a white van. The suspect made the little girl call her mother by cellular phone that she'd been abducted. After the little girl spoke to her mother very briefly, they hung up the phone. He said that this time he was going to let her go, but that if he ever saw her alone again, that she wasn't going to be freed.
Tiffany, what I have here is a catalog of facial features.
After I interviewed her, I called in the FBI and they provided me with a sketch artist.
You have kind of bushy eyebrows.
Bushy eyebrows, all right. Like this one here?
Mm-hmm.
Different facial characteristics are shown, and then she actually points out what is most like the suspect.
His mustache was heavy like this.
Okay.
Then the sketch artist will draw from that.
Okay, Tiffany, how's this?
That looks like him.
When we established that we had a possible suspect with the Tiffany kidnapping and the Christy Proctor abduction, we were all very excited about it. It gave us something to work on.
Martha, here's some information on white van license plates.
Thank you. We were receiving a lot of phone calls, people that looked like the composite drawing, and also a lot of white vans.
1729, I want to run a registration on a vehicle. License number is going to be 406, K as in king, 5, Z as in zebra.
There were insurmountable odds against us. But every poster that went out, every effort that I made, every lead that was followed was another odd that was knocked out of my way.
Upon reviewing the evidence, I hypothesized that Christy was on her way home with her girlfriend. They separated in front of the school. was living and breathing the little girl. I mean, every day I went to work, that's all I worked. Every night I went to bed, she was on my mind. Every morning I woke up, she was on my mind. I felt very sad, but at the same time I knew that I needed to be the strong person for the family. The one that kept everything together. When I received a phone call from the Plano Police Department, I felt in my stomach that it was Christy. When you have a gut feeling as a police officer or even as a citizen, you always go with your thoughts.
Detective Sanders?
Yes.
I'm Keith Grisham, Plano Police Department. Let me show you what we have. We have found what appears to be a human skull in this roadway.
A man that was picking up some cans found what he believed to be a skull.
Where we have discovered some more bones.
Once the medical examiner arrived at the scene and told us that we had what appeared to be a small child, we were aware that the Dallas Police Department was currently investigating a kidnapping case, which was approximately 2 years old.
Our dog made a hit on this box spring. Detective Minks, can you go ahead and raise the box springs? We have several bones underneath here. Tennis shoe.
Things started falling together when we determined that the tennis shoe was the same brand that Christy Proctor was wearing at the time of her abduction.
This is an x-ray taken of Christy when she was about 2 years old.
The forensic anthropologist and myself undertook an identification of this individual, comparing x-rays taken of the skull in this office with x-rays that were taken of Christy when she was just shy of her 2nd birthday.
And as you can see, this pattern in the suture line here is identical on both x-rays. These lines of identification here are as distinctive as a fingerprint.
In that sense, we were able to effect a positive identification of the remains as those of Christy Proctor.
The day that I went and told Laura that Christy was deceased, I remember feeling my heart pounding. I remember feeling nervous, like a knot in my stomach. There's not an easy way to tell somebody that your daughter's gone and you'll never see her again.
To me, Christy's death wasn't until that moment. What I remember saying is that that can't be true. That can't be true because look at all the work we've done. I mean, I had so determined I was going to find Christy, and she was alive.
I was just saying, I sure hope that we can develop some...
Every police officer always has one case that stands out above all the others. And this is mine. I try to maintain some optimism because I always hope that we are able to solve this someday. And even in a case like this, though she's gone, you don't give up. Because I'd like to think she didn't give up. I owe it to many people not to ever give up. And I won't.
Now it's your turn to take part in the investigation. Detectives identified Christy Proctor's killer as a white male who was in his mid to late 20s. Now he'd be in his mid to late 30s, of medium build, who smoked Cool brand cigarettes. He drove a white van in the Dallas area during 1986, which was equipped with a car phone, an unusual feature at the time. Please investigate the actual police files on our website, coldcase.com. You'll see all the evidence. You'll see the crime scenes, autopsy reports, forensics. You'll get all the information the police are using. You'll even be able to communicate with the detectives. In effect, millions of people around the world can now be honorary detectives. Or call toll-free 1-888-4-COLD-CASE. When a murder is committed and that homicide goes unsolved, it's a cold case, unless you help. Next on Cold Case.
Does it look like a hunting accident?
No, it doesn't look like a hunting accident to me.
And then detectives put a bloodhound on the scent of their suspect.
Is that where he went?
Our next case takes us to Jacksonville, Florida. It's deer hunting season, and sportsmen across the nation have flocked to the wilderness to test their skill. But Lieutenant Charlie Sharman is about to learn that this time the tables have turned, and the hunters are being hunted.
Hey guys, what we got?
Hey Charlie, we got a hunter out here that's been shot in the head. It's going to be signal 7.
Can you tell if it was an accidental?
Right now, we're not really sure. It's kind of strange.
The victim was an older white male, about 65 or 70. He had a gunshot wound to the side of his head. You could see a tree stand that was against a pine tree, which is common for hunters to use.
Witnesses right now. I've got our guys out.
When you first look at that, it's a good chance that the victim had an accident when he was climbing up the tree stand or climbing down it, an accidental discharge of that rifle. Any other wounds we can see? And then I wanted to make sure that that was the only wound. Let's take a look back here. I discovered that he had a massive gunshot wound to the back, which had been caused by a high-powered rifle or a very high-powered shotgun. So this is definitely not an accidental. We've got a homicide here. Brian, if you would, let's get a call in. Let's get the crime scene technicians out here, start working this. There was blood on the tree stand. There was blood in the palmetto fans. So I think he's probably climbing up. The shooter was standing off out there. Shot him in the back. That's where he fell. The question now is, well, why would they shoot him in the head, not take the rifle? Anytime you have a homicide, two things you have to look at is motive and opportunity. The opportunity is pretty easy. Anyone that saw the victim had an opportunity to kill him. Not everyone had a motive. And that's the tricky part in this case, is motive. There was a person who was the son of the victim. His name was Joe Hill. That's when I identified the victim as Mr. Don Hill. Joe? I'm Lieutenant Sharman.
Yes, sir.
Very sorry for your loss. But tell me. I asked Joe, I said, what type of person is your dad? He explained that, he's retired Navy. He had his share of wartime. You didn't get killed then. You figure you're going to live your life out peaceably.
My father really loved children. He loved to be around other people. No matter who you were, what the color of your skin was, he seemed to find friends in everybody. He was very friendly. He knew how to have conversations with people. He was a good man.
There was an individual who came forward and stated that he had seen Mr. Hill in his tree stand several times. I do not know these people. I have no idea where they come from or who they are. In my mind, they could be a killer. We decided to hypnotize the witness. This man stated that on Wednesday and Thursday, he had drove by and he saw Mr. Hill's vehicle beside the road, and he saw Mr. Hill standing in his tree stand, and he would toot the horn and wave at Mr. Hill. Mr. Hill would wave back. This individual did see on all 3 days a blue Dodge van parked approximately a quarter mile from Mr. Hill's vehicle, and the vehicle was backed into a tram road. I drove out to Cobb Camp. I met an individual there, Steve Williams, he works there, and Steve said that he had talked to Mr. Hill.
Fine. I'm Lieutenant Sharman with the Sheriff's Office. Yeah.
I had recalled meeting the man on Wednesday. This gentleman came into the camp with his pickup and a small camper, which he was towing. Asked me some questions about what I thought would be a good spot to camp, and I had noted one behind the check station. He was a nice guy. We had a nice conversation. He left me a couple of donuts. And that's the last time I ever saw him.
When Cold Case returns, a second homicide leads investigators to profiling a serial killer. Only 5 days after the Don Hill murder, Lieutenant Jim Redmond is called to the scene of a nearly identical homicide in neighboring Clay County.
Hey, Steve, what do you got?
Oh, we got shooting victim down here, one gunshot wound to the head, it appears.
Does it look like a hunting accident?
No, it doesn't look like a hunting accident to me.
Officer Steve Chance of the Game and Freshwater Fish Commission briefed me. There was a hunter who had been shot and killed. They weren't sure at that particular time what the circumstances leading up to his death might have been.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Jim, how you doing?
What do we got here?
Well, a mess, really.
Who is this fellow, do we know?
I don't know.
It's not a matter of getting used to seeing death. It's something that you come to expect and you react to it. It angers you. You overcome that immediate emotion and then you have a job to do.
FDLE is on the way?
Yes, the victim's head had massive injury. He was unrecognizable due to the trauma inflicted by the projectile.
See this blood?
Yes, it's about 2.5 feet.
And it's just about, yeah, it's almost on the line here. We got spatter that's going straight this way. So that tells me this, what? He's sitting on the log here. That's almost execution style.
Yes.
Having witnessed the victim laying in this fetal position, there's a certain amount of disgust.
Hopefully, if this guy did go through his pockets, maybe take his wallet or something, and we might be able to lift some prints off of those buttons. They look like
there had been an additional murder 5 days ago in Baker County, and the similarities between the cases was remarkable. The victim had been missing for approximately 24 hours. The father and the brother had come to Camp Landing in attempts to find the victim.
Brother, is it Vigo?
What I found in short order about Gregory Wood was that he was a fine individual.
Greg loved to hunt, loved to do everything outdoors. You know, he's a great fisherman, great hunter, great outdoors person. Greg loved to play golf. That was his life. His dream was to become a professional on the PGA Tour. Even though I have a lot of other children, it doesn't matter. Children aren't supposed to die before you do.
I met with Lieutenant Sharman. We immediately discussed some features of our cases.
I really don't know what the motive is, and like you say, it could be just somebody out there just who is after hunters to make this is sort of some kind of hunting game, the ultimate hunt, hunting a hunter. And in my opinion, what happened was Mr. Hill had spotted him a location off of Forest Road 257. He found him an area. Every day he'd go out at the same time and hunt and go in about the same time. I believe that Mr. Hill knew his killer and was coming down the tree stand to talk to him. Or this person confronted Mr. Hill, got into an argument with him. Hunters are very territorial. That could have been a confrontation. Mr. Hill was already dead, and he shot him in cold blood, walked up there, pointed the muzzle to his head, and blew his face off.
You think this guy's going to hit again relatively soon? Or?
If we do not catch this person and he's not arrested or killed, he will do it again. And I don't want that on my conscience.
Hey, Jim, how are you? Jim, how you doing? Good to see you. Pretty good. Henry?
I did interview 2 men at the check-in station. They told me that they saw a vehicle they believed to be a blue window van enter Camp Landing. They noticed that the two men were asking what they thought were suspicious questions concerning an area of interest. That particular area they were asking about was the site where Gregory Wood hunted and his body was found.
Hey, Josie, these are the tag
An offline search was done on all blue vans in the state of Florida. And at that time, they come back with like 30,000 registrations of blue vans.
We're going to have to swap witnesses.
We did receive a postcard from the state of Pennsylvania where the gentleman makes reference to what goes around comes around.
That's a good idea.
The animal activist could have went over the edge and decided to take matters into his own hand and start eliminating hunters to pay the hunters back for all the deer that have been killed out of the forest.
In our efforts to solve these murders, I've spent a number of nights, a number of weekends, actually dressed as a hunter. Officer Chance and myself will get together and we'll physically get out there in the woods doing surveillance. There are times when I will go to the site where Greg Wood was murdered. I'm trying to somehow absorb the ambience, what it must have been like for him. I almost picture that person approaching me, what he's saying to me. I'm trying to be Greg Wood years later.
I think it was somebody that just wanted to go kill somebody. In my own mind, I would sort of like to know why did this person do that? You know, why did he go kill my son?
Gregory Wood was simply a victim of opportunity by a very angry person. He knows how to fit in. He knows how to talk hunter talk. He's a cunning individual. He's calculated in his intent. Greg Wood happened to be hunting in the wrong place at the wrong time. He entered the woods and walked to his favorite spot to hunt from. His girlfriend mentioned to Greg that he needs to be careful because she had heard there had been a hunter killed in the Osceola forest. I believe that he was approached by this killer. I believe that approach was not threatening, relatively low profile. This person may have solicited Greg Wood for some sort of assistance. At one point, Greg let his guard down. He was probably disarmed. When they came to this tree which had fallen across the path, he had Greg sit down. Obviously, he was aware of the fact that a hunter had been killed a few days before. In my opinion, he was either in prayer or simply bowed his head in resignation and accepted the fact that he was going to be murdered.
When you can't find them and you've turned over everything you can turn over, every leaf you turn over, there's nothing under it. It is so frustrating, and that's when, you know, it just turns out to be a cold case.
I want this guy, and I want him bad, and I want him to answer to this unjust, seemingly motiveless murder of these two individuals.
The emerging science of profiling has enabled detectives to characterize the killer. They believe he was residing in the Jacksonville, Florida area during 1993. He's transient, and his familiarity with weapons suggests he's ex-military. It is also suspected that he owned or had access to a blue Dodge van. If you have any information, please review the actual police files at coldcase.com or call 1-888-4-COLD-CASE. Now it's your turn to take part in the investigation. Next on Cold Case, detectives in Orange County, California use scent to help identify a killer. Affluent Orange County, California, has just experienced a devastating bankruptcy. Detective Bob Blackburn heads the murder investigation of the assistant to one of the county's most important officials.
In Orange County, there was a bankruptcy that started about the first week of December of 1994. We learned that this victim was an assistant of an incoming Board of Supervisors member who himself was going to be in charge of trying to get our county out of bankruptcy. So this was going to be a high-profile case. Hey, Sharon. Hey, Mac.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Bob.
Can you give us an idea what happened?
Yeah, I can. We received a call from one of the Board of Supervisors by the name of Selva, reference his secretary.
The call initially started as a welfare check, which is somebody who's concerned about the person that lives at the residence because they haven't talked to them for a while or haven't seen them for a while.
As I looked inside, I saw the victim lying here in a pool of blood.
The door was unlocked, and the deputies went into the residence and found that the victim was indeed deceased.
Floor, looked, somebody went through the contents of her purse.
When you looked at the purse, was there any ID or anything laying around it?
I did not look for ID.
Okay. Hey, Larry. Our deputy that specializes in scenting a bloodhound arrived at the scene with a machine that is made specifically to go into a residence with him and draw the scent of the residents out into this machine.
It's very important that we go in first before anyone else because scent is delicate and we need to capture it before it can be contaminated with other individuals' personal scent. The scent transfer unit is nothing more than another tool for law enforcement. This is a new concept to being able to extract scent at the crime scene with a vacuum system. The machine actually vacuums up the scent into the sterile gauze pad, and that way we can then take that pad and bag it and seal it, and we have preserved that scent in that particular pad to be used at a later time.
You all set, Larry? I don't think there's anybody that enjoys looking at dead bodies. When I first started in homicide, it created some medical problems for me. It was difficult for me to deal with that. And I finally realized that I was going to have to find a way to burn off the extra stress that this type of work creates, or it was going to get the best of me. Get some from the other angle there, too. I came to the conclusion that the victim had just come home because of the mail that was scattered down the steps.
Mary, as soon as you can, we wanted to get the tape lifts so we could get a look at this wound.
There was a wound to the victim's chest, and we could see a hole through the jacket she was wearing as well as the blouse that she was wearing.
Well, it's a stellate shape. I'm going to remove this jacket and take a look at this wound.
Okay.
It was difficult to tell whether it was caused by a stabbing instrument or from a bullet.
Yeah, the cuts are...
It wasn't real cylindrical. It was more jagged.
What do you think, Rick? I mean, it's...
Well, it's definitely not a gunshot wound, but I mean, it has 3 bladed side to it. You know, those are sharp blades. They're not lacerations.
Right. And then as you get out in front...
A deputy documented our walkthrough on a videotape.
Came down.
We looked at the victim's purse, which had been dumped out on the floor.
And I don't know why they'd leave all these credit cards.
Looks like all the drawers been opened up.
Well, yeah, and even where the pots and pans are.
I've had other cases before where family members have been involved in a person's death, and they have purposely gone through and ransacked a house or staged a ransack to make it look like a burglar had come in and done the murder. Fingerprints were lifted inside the residence in several areas by the use of black powder in a fluorescent illumination technique where a certain liquid is used to try and bring up fingerprints using a laser type light. The victim's son showed up at the scene, and when he was told that his mother was deceased, he hesitated for a moment and seemed to have a little bit trouble breathing and said, "I need to go outside and get some fresh air." On his way out of the motorhome, he struck the wall of the motorhome and broke his hand. I thought that was a strange reaction to finding out that a loved one had been killed, but people react in different ways, and you can't ever assume a person is going to act a certain way when you tell them something like that. I did go to the victim's sister's house and spoke to her and her husband there.
She was actually working in the office. I'm not
I
sure
learned
who
that
it was.
Arlene spent a lot of time with her family,
decorated. Not having Arlene leaves an emptiness in my life that can never be replaced. And I focus on the wonderful memories that I have, and that keeps me going on those days when missing her is overwhelming. About 20, I told Detective Blackburn about how she and her husband had adopted a son when he was 13 years old. Well, they had had some financial difficulties.
I learned that the son of Arlene Hoffman had some tension with his mother over the fact that he wasn't working while he was going to school.
Hopefully we'll get a better look at the wounds here.
I'm sure we will.
The morning after, I went to Santa Ana to attend her autopsy at the coroner's office.
I really don't have a clue at this point. I don't know. When we looked at the entrance wound, we could see that it was star-shaped. There were incisions surrounding the wound that looked like they were caused by a sharpened blade, and very distinctive. I hadn't seen a wound like that before.
Right, Rick, it looks just like the entry wound.
We examined the exit wound and found it to have the identical 3 incision marks surrounding it, and that's unusual. From what we saw on that breastbone,
We were able to come to the conclusion at the end of the autopsy that it appeared that a bolt, or similar to an arrow, but a crossbow bolt, was probably used as the weapon.
When we return, Detective Blackburn puts a bloodhound on the scent of his suspect.
This one here is the Barnett Wildcat XL.
I had to educate myself on crossbows, bolts. Okay, what does a bow like this go for? It was amazing to me to find that these crossbows are constructed with not only pistol grips, but full-blown rifle stocks. What would you call this particular type of head?
That's a thunder.
Typically, a crossbow bolt has an arrowhead on it that is either 2-bladed, 3-bladed. It can go as high, I believe, as 8 blades.
Those are all the different types we sell here.
You have to put your foot in the stirrup and take your upper body strength to pull it back.
We actually set up a dummy and did a demonstration where crossbows were used to fire bolts into this dummy to find out the damage that it will do to a body and to find out the consistency of the injuries compared to the injuries that we had in this particular homicide. That was real powerful. If a crossbow is used to fire the bolt that killed Arlene Hoffman, that more than likely it was a less powerful one because the bolt didn't travel all the way through her body. So that indicated to us that the suspect took the bolt back out of the chest and took it with him.
Why don't you come back to the office and we can have...
I went to the Board of Supervisors and I had an appointment with Mr. Silva.
Why don't you grab a seat here and I'll sit. Arlene Hoffman was hired primarily to be my executive secretary.
As you're aware, Mr. Silva, I'm one of the case agents on Arlene Hoffman's murder, and I'd like to go into some details with you as to...
The bankruptcy was a primary concern. There were many people that were going to lose their jobs in the county. There were many businesses and different agencies throughout the county that lost millions and millions of dollars. Her son is called and had talked about receiving her paycheck.
He just thought it was unusual that during this grieving period of the family, the son's focus is on Arlene's last paycheck. I also learned that Arlene Hoffman had a $500,000 life insurance policy from her husband that was cashed in after her husband died, and that would have been part of her estate once she died.
I was packing, and then...
The son of Arlene Hoffman was interviewed quite at length.
So you got home from dinner around...
I asked him what his activities were the day before we found Arlene, and basically his answer was he was home all day.
We were close.
He mentioned the fact that he had several roommates at the house, so at that point I realized that I needed to talk to these roommates as soon as possible to try and corroborate what he was saying and see how strong an alibi that he had. During the interviews, we became aware that one of the roommates was, or at least used to be, an avid bow hunter.
Okay, these will record your breathing patterns.
Arlene's son did take the polygraph test.
Do you live in Southern California?
Yes.
Polygraph does not detect lies. It detects changes in the physiological makeup of an individual, which could be a change in either their breathing patterns, galvanic skin response, or in their cardio area. Did you kill Arlene Hoffman?
No.
At the onset of any investigation, we're trying to eliminate people as suspects.
Well, I'm just sitting here trying to compare arrows.
It's just hard for me to believe that this was a random murder. Most burglars are going to steal anything of value. They're going to take credit cards, they're going to take jewelry, they're going to take cash. There was a grid search done and came up with a contact that one of the deputies had with an individual who claimed that he lost a crossbow or had one stolen from him.
And were you in the service?
Yeah.
How long ago?
During the interview with this person, he told me that he had a past drug problem, but that he hadn't used drugs since November 10th, which was about 6 weeks before this murder.
Have a seat. I'm going to get with you here.
I asked him if he would take a polygraph, and he agreed to.
Okay.
I had notified our dog handler and asked him to bring one of his bloodhounds down to see if the bloodhound could track this individual after he walked in to take his polygraph.
You ready to go to work?
I had brought with me one of the scent pads from the victim's residence. That scent pad was used to scent the dog on. If there was going to be a scent trail, the dog was supposed to follow it.
The individual had gone into the station and I had no idea where he went. I didn't even have any idea where the polygraph room was.
Before your 20th birthday, did you ever physically hurt anyone when you didn't have to?
No.
She indicated to me by sniffing the door and so on that she wanted to go through that door.
As he proceeded down the hallway, he looked into several of these offices and ended up at the door where the polygraph was being given to this individual. It didn't appear like the dog had any problem following this trail. I couldn't believe it. It was, I thought we had a suspect here. Unfortunately, when I found out that his polygraph results were somewhat truthful, I was still hoping that during a post-interview of this individual that he would at least admit his involvement.
Well, I don't.
Now, why should I believe that you've never met this person before?
Because I don't know the guy.
What if I told you that this person had been in the
But he's intimately denied that he didn't have any involvement in this murder. In my opinion, based on what we've been able to find out, it appears that Arlene got home from work on Thursday evening. She went and got her dog and walked the dog out to the mailbox. It seems to me that this perpetrator used this crossbow for one reason: to make the killing quick, to make sure that he didn't create a lot of noise, and to make sure that he was successful. The suspect apparently came down the steps and removed the bolt from Arlene's chest and then left the residence. It was a cold-blooded murder, and that person needs to be held accountable for what he or she did. And that's why we need the public's help in this case. From everything we've uncovered, I haven't been able to eliminate Arlene's son or his roommate or this other person that we found with the crossbow.
Now it's your turn to take part in the investigation.
Arlene Hoffman was murdered with an unusual weapon, a crossbow bolt with a three-bladed tip. The bloodhound tracked scent is not enough evidence to charge the one suspect with murder. Detectives are seeking information on any individuals familiar with crossbows who resided in Orange County during the time of the murder.
These courageous and dedicated detectives are not willing to give up. They know that crimes are often solved years after they occur. Cold case squads are being developed across the country with a 60% success rate. New technology, DNA analysis, and profiling are making it much more difficult to get away with murder. Please investigate the actual police files on our website, coldcase.com, or call 1-888-4-COLD-CASE. All it takes is an undiscovered witness or a fresh lead, and a cold case can become a closed case. I'm Richard Crenna, and this is Cold Case.